My name is Rory Michaels. I run the graveyard shift at a radio station. It sits like a lonely metal box in the middle of the Arizona desert. Not the pretty desert with colorful cliffs and tour buses. Just heat, dry brush, and a flat horizon that never seems to end. The town we're supposed to serve is 2 hours away, and most nights I'm not even sure the signal reaches that far. I didn't take this job for the music. Half the time it's 70s soft rock and old AM favorites, the kind your uncle listens to after too many drinks at Thanksgiving. And I'm fairly sure the only people tuned in are sleepy truck drivers or retirees who never learned how to use Spotify. I'm not here for journalism either, not really. I'm here because strange things happen out here. Lights in the sky, roads that don't appear on any map, old stories whispered by people who have lived too long in the middle of nowhere. The kind of stories that never make the news because no one wants to sound crazy. That's the stuff I've always been chasing. When I was 10, I stayed up all night writing down supernatural sightings from our county library. I memorized monster classifications instead of baseball stats. I convinced myself my house was haunted just so I could sleep in the hallway with a tape recorder. My parents didn't like that. They kept saying I'd grow out of it, that I'd stop filling notebooks with blurry photos and secondhand stories, but I never did. I just got better at keeping it quiet. By high school, I learned how to make it look like a phase. I joined the yearbook staff so I could sneak into the darkroom. I wrote essays about old buildings so I could explore condemned places without anyone asking questions. I stopped talking about the occult out loud, but I never stopped writing about it. I kept everything in spiral notebooks hidden under my mattress. My parents thought I was finally changing. They wanted me to pick something practical, engineering, maybe, or law, but all I wanted was to get closer to the edge of the map. So I told them I was majoring in journalism, which was technically true. What I didn't tell them was that I chose a college with a folklore archive and a decent paranormal research club. I spent more time in the basement scrolling through microfilm than I did in lectures. I interviewed conspiracy theorists and amateur demon experts for class projects. I once wrote a paper comparing cult behavior to early fan forums. I got an A. I also got a few strange looks. After graduation, I knew I wasn't built for cable news or lifestyle articles. I wasn't trying to land a book deal or expose corruption. I wanted a microphone. I wanted a quiet place where I could talk into the dark and maybe, just maybe, have something strange talk back. That's how I found the station. I answered a job listing with no company name, no salary, and no phone number. Just a P.O. box and 4 words, late night radio host. I applied immediately. A week later, I got an envelope with a station badge and a set of keys. There was a note that said, "Start Monday, don't be late." Now, most nights, I sit behind the mic while the desert hums outside. I cue up songs. I flip through the small notebook beside the console, filled with sightings, rumors, and things people swear they saw. When the moment feels right, I lean in, press the button, and start talking. Welcome to radio station KMCR. Out in the middle of nowhere. I should probably tell you about the only other radio host here, and maybe a bit more about the station itself. My co-host is Christian. He works the same overnight shift and is the only person I ever really see. We share a cramped control room, the same old coffee machine, and a vending machine that barely works. Most nights, it's just the two of us sitting a few feet apart with our microphones and mismatched mugs, trying to stay awake and make the show sound decent. Christian's about my age, early 20s, maybe a year older, but he acts more nervous than that. He always seems like he's waiting for someone to tell him he messed up. That's probably why we get along. He doesn't tease me about my strange interests. He doesn't ask too many questions when I start rambling about haunted highways or government experiments. Sometimes he nods, sometimes he laughs, sometimes he looks uneasy, but he stays. That's more than most people do. The station is called KMCR, but the name doesn't really mean anything. It's not part of a network or a media group. It's just a squat one-story building made of faded stucco and warped glass at the end of a cracked service road. There's no sign outside. No one ever stops by for a tour. It feels forgotten on purpose. Inside, the layout is simple. 2 recording rooms, Studio A and Studio B, a narrow hallway lined with old vinyl, and an office no one uses. There's a break room with a fridge that makes a high-pitched noise when it kicks on, and a storage closet that never stays shut. The front door uses a keypad, but the code never changes. A cleaning crew comes during the day, but I only ever see them after lunch. There are maybe 20 people on payroll if you count the janitors and the guy who fixes the tower after lightning strikes. I've never met most of them. I don't think Christian has either. The only real structure we have is something called the AM show. It starts around 1 a.m. and runs until we get bored or need to cue the next songs. Officially, it's supposed to be casual talk. News, politics, entertainment, whatever's trending. Something to make the station feel alive. Unofficially, it's my favorite part of the night, because it's when I get to talk about what I care about. UFO cover-ups, unexplained disappearances, strange calls from listeners who claim they've seen things they can't explain. I guide the conversation there whenever I can. Christian doesn't always follow, but he doesn't stop me either. He'll jump in sometimes, ask questions, or mention a strange article he read. We wander into movie talk or fast food debates, but I always circle back to the weird stuff. There's a rhythm now. Christian handles weather and local updates. I dig into the strange notes under the console. We trade the mic back and forth. Some nights we barely speak. Other nights we can't shut up. It depends on how tired we are and how much coffee we've had. But tonight I'm wide awake, and I've got a few stories ready. Just small things that have been happening out here over the past couple months. Odd moments, strange sightings, stuff I've been writing down between songs, waiting for the right time. Turns out that time is now. So if you're driving, standing in your kitchen, or lying awake in a dark room with only the sound of your radio, this is your warning. Buckle up, refill your coffee. We've got a long night ahead. Story 1, I learned about the station's history on my very first day, thanks to Christian. I showed up about an hour early, like I always do when I start somewhere new. It helps me get settled before things begin. The sun was still up when I pulled into the lot. The station looked even smaller than it did in the photo they sent with my badge. 1 story, beige stucco peeling in spots, antennas leaning at odd angles. There was only one other car parked there. After a moment, I turned off the engine, grabbed my backpack, and walked up to the front door. The keypad worked on the first try. They'd written the code 1717 on the back of the ID badge. I figured maybe someone would be inside waiting, maybe to give me a tour or at least say hi. But the building was empty, quiet. The control room was down the hall on the left, just like the map they'd sent. I set my things down, checked the schedule, and looked over the audio levels. Everything seemed normal. There were no real instructions except play tracks from the 70s folder and fill airtime with banter. The playlist for the night was already lined up. Someone had set it to run on auto. I didn't even need to touch anything until the AM show started, so I decided to make some coffee. The welcome packet mentioned an espresso machine, a cheap one, probably bought on sale. I checked the break room first, but all I found was the regular drip coffee pot and a box of sugar packets that had hardened into little bricks. I opened a few cupboards, plates, instant noodles, dust. No espresso machine. Eventually, I ducked into the storage closet at the end of the hall. It was dim and packed with boxes, old cables, extra mic stands, a few broken chairs stacked against the wall. I figured if the espresso machine wasn't here, it was probably long gone. While I was crouched down, checking behind a crate labeled MISC. Tape reels, I noticed something wedged behind a cardboard box. It was a photo album, black cover, no label, just a cheap 3-ring binder with thick plastic sleeves. I pulled it out, sat down on the crate, and started flipping through it. The first few pages looked harmless enough. People smiling in front of the station, a ribbon, cutting photo with a woman holding oversized scissors, employees laughing, holding coffee mugs, pointing at soundboards. Everyone was wearing the same t-shirt, the Watermelon Company. Big white letters on faded green fabric. I didn't recognize anyone. There were group photos taken in the parking lot, potluck tables, birthday cakes, holiday decorations in the break room. It looked like any small office from the 90s or early 2000s. Then I reached the last page. There was only one photo. Unlike the others, this one wasn't placed neatly. It had been shoved into the sleeve sideways, like whoever added it didn't want to look at it for long. The photo showed a window pane, the same kind as the ones in Studio B, and right in the center was what looked like a bloody handprint, except it wasn't a hand. It was a bloody goat hoof. The mark was smeared, like whatever made it had been moving while it left the print. I took the album back to the control room. Christian, who I'd talked to on the phone the night before, was already there flipping through the log sheet. The other car in the lot must have been his. He looked up when I walked in, and I said, "Hey, quick question. Did you know we've got some really weird photo albums here?" He raised an eyebrow and asked what kind of weird. I handed him the binder and pointed to the last page. He didn't flip straight to it. He started at the beginning, just like I had. His face stayed neutral at first, but when he reached the final photo, his expression shifted. He went pale and rubbed the back of his neck like it suddenly itched. "Ah," he said, "yeah. Ah, what am I looking at? Some kind of prank? Halloween thing, what's the story?" I asked, wanting details. "All right. So, rumor has it, the station wasn't started by just radio nerds. It was founded by a group. Some people say it was a cult," he said. "Okay, you have my full attention," I said, grinning. "They called themselves the Watermelon Company. That's why the shirts, I guess. It was a front, or maybe they were trying to look normal. Either way, they pooled their money to build the station from scratch," he explained. "Why out here?" I asked. Christian shrugged. "They wanted to be far away. The story is they used the station to broadcast messages, not to regular people. To other followers, it was like a beacon. They believed in something called the Mother. I don't know what that means. I don't think anyone really does." I pointed at the photo again. "And the goat print?" He glanced at it. "Maybe a ritual. The station sits next to what used to be a goat farm. If you look out Studio B's east window, you can still see the old well. A cult with a private radio station in the desert," I said, shaking my head. "Man, why didn't they put that in the job listing?" Christian laughed shortly, but he looked uneasy. I clapped him on the back and said, "Well, if it's haunted, at least I know I picked the right job." After that, we went quiet. The playlist hummed through the speakers, and the control board clicked softly as I leaned back in my chair and stared toward the direction of that well. Things got a whole lot more interesting after that. Story 2. After the first week, Christian and I settled into a routine. We'd clock in around 11:30 p.m., make coffee, cue up the first block of 70s music, and let the night crawl by. Around 1 a.m., we'd start the AM show. Some nights we talked about movies or strange headlines. Other nights we wandered into darker territory, old mysteries, local legends, or listener stories that felt too strange to fake. Christian usually went along with it. He let me ramble about alien implants or old wartime broadcast experiments. He didn't always join in, but he didn't stop me either. Most nights, it was easy. until the signal started. It was near the end of our second week. We were halfway through the show, and I had just finished a segment about urban legends that turned out to be marketing tricks. Christian was flipping through the station log when he paused. "You hear that?" he asked. I took off my headphones and listened. The music was still playing, something slow and soft, maybe Fleetwood Mac, but underneath it, barely noticeable, was a broken signal, just noise. It lasted about 10 seconds, then disappeared. "Could be interference," I said. "Maybe the tower's picking up bleed from another frequency." Christian didn't answer right away. He looked at the clock. It was exactly 3:11 a.m. That would have been the end of it. Just a strange moment, if it hadn't happened again the next night. And the night after that, every single time, right at 3:11 a.m., the same broken transmission came through, faint, messy, like something unfinished. It always lasted the same amount of time and always ended with 3 soft thumps. Like knocking, I started recording it after the third time. Christian told me not to bother. He said it was probably old equipment looping back. He said it wasn't worth worrying about, but I'd spent my whole life chasing unexplained signals. I wasn't letting this go. By the 5th night, I had several recordings. I brought in my old laptop and started working on them. I slowed them down, reversed them, ran filters. Most of it was noise, but the pattern stood out, especially before the knocking. I slowed one recording to half speed and boosted the sound. That's when I heard it. Under the noise, buried deep in distortion, was a voice. Hard to hear, but clear enough after replaying it again and again. After about 20 minutes, I understood the words. It kept repeating the same phrase. "Feed the well, feed the well." I leaned back and played it again. Slower, same words. My brain locked onto the pattern. Christian walked in from the break room just as I queued it up again. "You need to hear this," I said, turning up the volume. He paused in the doorway. "Is that the signal?" "Yeah, I filtered it. Listen." I hit play. The voice came through again, muffled, repeating, clear enough to understand. "Feed the well, feed the well." Christian stood still, then slowly stepped forward. He listened until the knocks finished, then turned and walked out without saying a word. I found him in the hallway a few minutes later, hands in his pockets, staring out the side window toward the field behind the station. I didn't mention how he looked like he was questioning every decision he'd ever made. "It's about the well, right?" I said. "That's where the cult stuff happened, where the goats were, where Rory," he said. "I don't know what it is, but don't chase this." I blinked. "What? This could be real EVP, real unexplained signal activity." "No," he said, turning to face me. "I mean it. Don't chase this." "Why?" I asked. "Because you don't know what you're messing with. This place has history, the kind people don't talk about. If something's trying to reach out, maybe we don't want to know what it wants." I didn't know what to say. I thought he was just scared, but it bothered him deeply. The kind of fear that comes from experience, not stories. Unfortunately, that only made me more curious. My mom always said I was stubborn as a mule. Over the next few nights, I kept tracking the signal. Every night at 3:11 a.m. without fail. 10 seconds of noise, the voice, the 3 knocks. Christian started taking early breaks to avoid hearing it. I stopped telling him what I found. I couldn't help myself. Then, about a week later, the signal changed. It came in stronger, loud enough to light up the meters. It wasn't part of the playlist. It wasn't satellite. It was something else. I cut the music to trace it. It was local, on site. I followed the signal path. It was broadcasting from just behind the station, within meters of the building. I stood up and looked out the back window toward the overgrown lot beyond the fence. There was the old well, rusted metal, dry weeds. The signal was coming from there. I was right. Story 3, I couldn't stop thinking about the well. Every time I cued another track or flipped a switch, my eyes drifted to the back window. That broken circle of rusted metal beyond the fence felt heavier with every glance. Since the signal went from faint to clear, from distant to close, I knew I had to look deeper. Christian wouldn't talk about it anymore. He shut down whenever I brought it up. He didn't deny anything, though. That told me enough, so I took another path. The archives. The station didn't have a real library, but there was a back room off the hallway marked records with faded tape. I pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, dust hanging in the air. Inside were metal filing cabinets, uneven stacks of boxes, and piles of folders that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. I brought a lamp from the break room, set it on a stool, and began going through the mess. Most of it was what you'd expect. Old broadcast logs from decades past, lists of music rotations, old commercials for car dealerships that probably didn't exist anymore. But the deeper I looked, the stranger it got. Some folders had pages that looked like sermons or transcripts, handwritten notes with phrases like "all offerings accounted for," and "may the mouth stay full." I found a manila envelope full of Polaroids of fruit. Not people, just fruit. Different melons, all cut open and marked with dates. At first, I thought maybe it was some strange ad campaign. Maybe the watermelon company had started as a food brand or a farm co-op. But then I checked the financial records. There weren't any. I went through old tax files, scanned every old letterhead and signature. The watermelon company never filed taxes. No EIN, no payroll, nothing in state or federal records. It didn't exist as a business. On paper, it was nothing, and yet it owned things. I found purchase orders, real stamped, signed ones, showing that the company had bought massive amounts of seeds. Specifically, heritage watermelon seeds, thousands of them, crates sent from all over the country. Some labeled heirloom, some marked untreated or non-commercial. There were dozens of orders over many years, all sent to the station's address. I kept digging. One older logbook, written in green pen, had short notes under each week of programming. Some were normal, like adjust gain on mic 2, or replace light in booth. But others were stranger. Week 17, feeder seeds. Week 25, no show tonight, one down the well. Week 31, midsummer, her teeth reach. I took a few photos so I could think about them later. By then, it was just after 4 a.m. Christian came around the corner, still holding his mug from earlier. He looked half asleep until he saw me hunched over the files. He stopped. "You're still at it," he said. I nodded and turned the notebook so he could read the entry. I pointed at the line. "Feed her seeds. What do you think it means?" I stood up and gestured at the piles. The watermelon company never filed anything. No taxes, no wages, no legal record. But they ordered huge amounts of melon seeds, like giant quantities. They weren't running a station. They were running something else. He let out a slow breath and leaned against the wall. I waited. Finally, he spoke. "Okay, yeah. I didn't want to get into this, but you're not going to drop it, are you?" He rubbed his face, then looked at me. The watermelon company wasn't a company. It was a front, a cult. That part is true. They didn't worship the mother as a metaphor. They meant it, literally. They believed the well behind the station was a mouth, a real one. Some opening between our world and whatever they thought was on the other side. They thought it led to an ancient being. Powerful, hungry. They wanted to make a deal. They called it the mother. I blinked, like, capital M. He nodded. I paced a little, trying to understand. So they planted seeds around the well. Christian said they didn't plant them, but fed them to her as offerings. He must have seen my confused look because he continued. They'd toss them down the well. Seeds, fruit, livestock. Rumors say even people, newcomers, outsiders. People no one would miss. I raised an eyebrow. "Okay, that's really dark." Christian shrugged. That's what they believed. If they kept the mouth full, the mother would bless the land, keep it fertile, keep it safe. Their broadcasts were prayers. They were asking other followers to send more, to bring more. I stared at him. And the station is still here. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast, nodding, but the cult is gone. I asked, as far as I know. The place changed hands a few times, eventually became a regular station. No one talks about the early years, he said. I looked at the papers, so you knew this and never said anything. He shrugged, saying he didn't think it mattered. Plus, stories like that scared him. I gave a small smile. You know this is peak Arizona behavior, right? He rolled his eyes. Seriously? Who starts a radio cult in the middle of nowhere, worships a fruit-eating eldritch being, and then disappears? I held up the notebook page. Apparently, the people who hired us. Christian muttered. I looked toward the window, barely seeing the edge of the well beyond the fence. I didn't know then, but learning about my employer's cult past wasn't the strangest thing that month. Not by far. I didn't stop checking the well after that. Every shift around the same time, I'd glance out the side window to see if anything had changed. It became a habit, a nervous tick I didn't even think about. Christian noticed, of course. He stopped asking, probably figuring he couldn't stop me. And he was right. We both knew something was happening out there. The only difference was I wanted answers. Then, one night, the AM show got interrupted. We were live. I was talking about recent UFO sightings near Interstate 89. Truckers had reported bright lights near the cliffs, hovering low, flickering like broken headlights. I had calls lined up. Christian checked the log. Everything seemed normal. Then the console glitched. The live light blinked out for a second. The system froze. A message flashed on the screen I'd never seen. Auto switch engaged. Then the audio changed. A woman's voice filled the room. Not someone we knew. Not a caller, not a recording. At first, it wasn't even English. She spoke slowly, like each word took effort. Her voice sounded warped, like moving through water. Christian leaned forward. What is this? I didn't know. The voice went on for 30 more seconds while I tried to speak over it and cut the broadcast. I couldn't understand any words, but the tone made my skin prickle. Then dripping started. Behind her, soft splashes. Something moving in water, slow, heavy, like a large shape just below the surface. Just before it ended, she switched to English. Children, come home. The lights flickered. Outside, something creaked. We both turned toward the window. It was the well. The metal cover shifted. Not wind, not anything we could see, but pressure from inside. It groaned like something pushing up. The sound was deep and sharp, like bending steel. I stepped closer, squinting at the floodlight's edge. The lid buckled, flying up with a loud clang, landing sideways in the dirt with a crash. Dust kicked up. The window rattled. Christian jumped so hard, his chair slid back. I didn't move. The cover spun, then settled. At first, nothing happened. Then I saw movement. Fast, small shapes swarming over the edge, spilling into the gravel. Spiders, not a few, dozens, then hundreds. Waves of them poured out, crawling over each other, scattering across the dry ground like a kicked-over nest. Long legs, shiny black bodies, some small, some big enough to make noise hitting dirt. They tumbled over each other like fleeing something behind them, or running straight for us. Jesus Christ, are you seeing this? I muttered, stepping back. Christian didn't answer. He was already halfway down the hall. I snapped to the board, hands shaking, and killed the broadcast. My finger slipped once, then hit the switch. Mics off, lines dead, music looping quietly. Through the window, I saw Christian dragging the green garden hose from the side of the building. He cranked the valve, water bursting out. He sprayed the ground near the door where the spiders were climbing. He blasted them back, left and right. Some reached the door, but he didn't stop. Eventually, the ground was soaked, and the last of the spiders disappeared into the brush under the building between cracks. The well stayed open, dark and empty, for now. Christian shut off the hose and walked back inside. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the night. We didn't talk much after that. The well stayed open for 2 more days. We kept the blinds closed, avoided the window, played only music. No calls, no AM show. The signal didn't return. No more spiders. Eventually, someone came and welded the cover shut. Didn't ask questions. Just did the job and left. Weeks passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. This place is more than a radio station. Always has been. To the people who built it, it was something else. A signal tower. A message board. Maybe even a feeding place. Whatever the mother is. Whatever lives under that well. I don't think she's finished. That's why I stayed. I had every reason to leave. Most people would have run when the equipment started speaking. I've seen lesser men pack up over bad drip coffee and broken wiring. But this place has its hooks in me. Like my dad said, I'm too curious for my own good. Christian is halfway gone. Ever since the spiders. He says it's not safe. We're in over our heads. I believe him, but I think he's lying to himself. He wants answers too. He just doesn't want to face it first. So for now, he stays. And so do I. Behind the mics, night after night. Playing music, killing dead air, waiting for the next piece to fall into place. Out here, nothing's certain. Except the signal keeps coming, and something out there is still listening. If you're out there on a highway, at a truck stop, staring at the ceiling in a quiet motel, I hope you're paying attention. These stories sound strange, but they're real. We're living them, one night at a time. This has been Rory on the AM show, and you're listening to KMCR. Out in the middle of nowhere.